What if I told you that for decades, the world you think you know has been carefully constructed, every piece of ordinary life hiding something far greater, something so terrifying and yet fascinating that the truth itself has been buried under layers of denial, ridicule, and secrecy? Tonight, you're going to hear a story that isn't just rumor or speculation. It's the closest thing to a hidden truth that has slipped through the cracks of silence. Because what I'm about to share connects strange lights in the sky, missing time, and shadowy figures who always appear when someone gets too close to uncovering reality. This is the story of a global cover-up involving the United States, a presence from beyond our planet, and the men in black who make sure ordinary people like us never find out what's really happening. It begins not in the desert, not on a military base, but with a single man who swore he lived through something impossible. His name was Daniel, an ordinary construction worker from Ohio. He wasn't a dreamer, not the type to talk about mysteries, and definitely not the type to draw attention. But one night, driving home along a lonely stretch of highway, Daniel noticed something above the tree. At first, he thought it was a plane, bright lights hovering too low, too steady. Then the silence hit him. No engine, no sound at all. Just an immense, glowing disk hanging in the night. He tried to convince himself it was some kind of drone, some kind of trick, but the moment his car shut down, lights flickering and engine stalling, he knew this was something far beyond his understanding. The next thing Daniel remembered wasn't the object. It wasn't the car. It wasn't even the road. He was lying on a metallic surface in a cold, dimly lit chamber. His body felt heavy, his mind clouded, but he could sense movement around him. Tall, slender beings with elongated heads and eyes darker than the void itself leaned over him, their hands moving with precision. He couldn't speak, couldn't scream, but he felt every sensation, the vibration of instruments, the cold pressure on his skin, and a sound, not with his ears, but directly in his mind, telling him not to be afraid. Hours seemed to vanish in a blink, and the next thing he knew, Daniel was back in his car, engine running, radio static hissing, and the disk in the sky gone as if it had never been there. When he stumbled home that night, shaken and pale, he told himself it had to be a dream. But the next morning, when he noticed the small, triangular marks on his forearm, burning slightly, arranged in a pattern too perfect to be accidental, he realized he had carried something back with him. He told no one, at least not at first. But weeks later, when he finally confided in a close friend, something strange happened. The very next day, two men in dark suits arrived at his workplace. They weren't cops, weren't FBI, but they spoke with authority, flashing badges that looked official yet somehow wrong. They didn't ask, they demanded. They demanded to know what Daniel had seen, what he remembered, and who else he had told. Their eyes were cold, their smiles thin, and when Daniel hesitated, they leaned in close, reminding him that accidents happen, that lives can change in an instant, and that for his own good, he should forget everything. He wanted to believe they were just government agents doing their job, but the way they moved, the way their voices seemed almost too controlled, too rehearsed, chilled him to the bone. That night, Daniel swore he saw the same black sedan parked near his street, headlights off, engine humming. Every time he glanced outside, it was there, watching. The next morning, the triangular marks on his arm were gone. Not healed, not scarred. Gone, as if they had never existed. That was when Daniel began to realize this wasn't just about him. It wasn't about one sighting or one abduction. This was part of something much larger, a web of control woven across decades, maybe longer, stretching across nations, always hidden behind the curtain of national security. And Daniel's story is only the beginning of uncovering how deep this conspiracy really goes. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to dive into research, but the strange events in his life forced him to start digging. He began reading late at night, scrolling through obscure forums, hunting for anyone who described what he had gone through. To his shock, he found hundreds of accounts, people from across the country, even across the world, all describing the same lights, the same silence, the same missing time, and most disturbingly, the same men who appeared afterward to warn them to stay quiet. Some called them the men in black, others simply the agents. But every story carried the same pattern: an encounter with something beyond human understanding followed by intimidation designed to erase it. What chilled Daniel the most was realizing that many of these stories dated back decades. Farmers in the 1950s, airline pilots in the 70s, even military personnel in the 90s. All spoke of encounters not only with strange craft, but with beings who did not belong to this earth. And every time, the same shadowy figures arrived to silence them. He started to think back on his own experience inside that chamber. The beings had never harmed him, never shown violence. In fact, the message in his mind, "Do not be afraid," was the only sense of calm in an otherwise terrifying night. But the men in black? Their presence was pure intimidation, which begged the question, who was he supposed to fear, the visitors or his own government? One evening, while researching, Daniel came across a story that mirrored his so closely he almost dropped his laptop. A retired Air Force officer claimed he had been stationed near a secretive installation in Nevada. During a routine patrol, his unit witnessed a glowing triangular craft rise silently from the desert floor and vanish into the sky. Minutes later, the officer blacked out. When he awoke, his team was scattered, confused, and missing hours of memory. Days afterward, the men in black appeared at his home, warning him never to discuss what he had seen. The officer described the same cold, unnatural presence Daniel had felt from them. And when the officer tried to resist, his career collapsed almost overnight. His clearance was stripped, his pension jeopardized, and his family harassed until he stopped speaking out. Daniel realized this wasn't a random pattern. This was an organized effort. Someone, or something, was controlling the narrative, ensuring humanity stayed blind. But Daniel's story took an even stranger turn. Weeks after his encounter, he began experiencing vivid dreams. Dreams of stars, of strange constellations he had never studied. He saw structures floating in orbit, not satellites, but colossal shapes that seemed alive. He would wake up drenched in sweat, convinced he had traveled somewhere far beyond Earth. More troubling were the physical changes. Electronics around him malfunctioned. Streetlights flickered when he passed under them. His phone would freeze whenever he held it for too long. Something had been done to him in that chamber, and now he was carrying it with him. He kept it hidden, but he knew if the men in black suspected, they would return. One night, while driving home again, he saw the black sedan parked at the end of his street. Only this time, he didn't look away. He walked toward it. The window rolled down just enough for a pale face to appear, smiling without warmth. "You're getting curious again, Daniel," the man said. His voice was too smooth, almost mechanical. "Curiosity is dangerous." Daniel froze. But before he could respond, the car pulled away silently. No engine revving, no headlights. Just gone. That was the moment Daniel understood. He wasn't dealing with ordinary agents at all. Whatever these men in black were, they weren't fully human. And if that was true, then the conspiracy went deeper than he had ever imagined. Daniel began reaching out to others who had spoken publicly, those who hadn't been silenced yet. Through encrypted chats and late-night calls, he pieced together a frightening picture. According to one whistleblower who had worked briefly at a government research facility, the United States wasn't just aware of these visitors, they were in direct contact. Agreements had been made, exchanges conducted, technology shared in secret labs hidden from the public eye. And the men in black? They were the enforcers of that pact, ensuring no one disrupted the fragile arrangement between humanity and those from the stars. The more Daniel learned, the more impossible it became to ignore. He wasn't just a random abductee. He had been chosen, marked, perhaps even altered, and now he was caught in a silent war that most of the world would never believe was happening. A war not between nations, but between truth and silence. He couldn't stop thinking about the message he had felt during the abduction: "Do not be afraid." Were the visitors trying to warn him? Or were they simply pacifying him while something much larger unfolded in the shadows? Whatever the answer, Daniel knew his life had changed forever. And he also knew something terrifying. Once you see behind the curtain, there's no going back. Daniel's obsession grew into something he could no longer control, And with every passing day, the boundaries between paranoia and reality blurred. He began collecting documents, testimonies, even leaked reports he stumbled across in hidden corners of the internet. What he found was shocking. References to joint operations between the United States and other world powers, meetings that never appeared in official records, and budget lines buried so deeply in government accounts that only insiders could understand what they funded. The pattern was clear. This was no longer a national secret, but a global one. The visitors had been here far longer than anyone dared to admit, and governments across the world had built an unspoken alliance to manage contact, conceal evidence, and control public perception. It explained the silence, the ridicule, the endless campaign to paint witnesses as unstable or delusional. Daniel realized that the true conspiracy wasn't about hiding the existence of the visitors. It was about controlling the narrative of humanity's place in the universe. If people knew we were being watched, studied, even altered, how would society react? Panic? Collapse? Or worse, blind obedience to those in power? Daniel's dreams intensified. He began seeing symbols, patterns of light that repeated over and over, burned into his mind like instructions. He sketched them obsessively, covering his walls with strange diagrams. When he compared them to ancient texts and carvings from civilizations separated by oceans and centuries, his blood ran cold. The same patterns appeared in Sumerian tablets, Mayan temples, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Could it be that humanity's earliest cultures had already been in contact with the same intelligence? If so, then our entire history had been shaped by something we never truly understood. Daniel wasn't sure if he was uncovering hidden knowledge or simply being manipulated into obsession, but he couldn't stop. One night, after weeks of these visions, he received an encrypted message from a contact he barely knew. It contained a single line: "If you want answers, go to Raven Rock." He almost laughed. Raven Rock was a massive underground facility in Pennsylvania, a continuity of government site rumored to be a backup command center in case Washington was destroyed. But the rumors also spoke of deeper levels, sections never acknowledged publicly. Daniel knew it was insane, but curiosity had already consumed him. He drove out near the mountain, knowing full well the area was restricted. He didn't get far. A black vehicle intercepted him before he reached the perimeter. Two figures stepped out, men in black, tall, rigid, their movements almost synchronized. They didn't threaten him this time. Instead, one leaned close and whispered words that froze Daniel's soul. "You've already been inside." The phrase echoed in his mind for days. He had no memory of Raven Rock, no memory of any underground base, yet the certainty in the man's voice suggested otherwise. Could his missing time have included more than just the abduction? Had he been taken not only by the visitors, but also by his own government? The possibility made him sick. Suddenly, his life wasn't just a matter of being watched. It was a labyrinth of erased memories and false realities. From that point on, Daniel noticed subtle changes in his surroundings. Strangers at grocery stores seemed to linger near him too long. Conversations on his phone cut off at odd moments. Even his closest friends started avoiding him, claiming they felt uneasy in his presence. Whether it was paranoia or deliberate interference, Daniel was being isolated. That was the perfect strategy: break him down, make him doubt everything, and ensure no one believed him if he spoke out. But instead of silencing him, it only pushed him further into the mystery. Late one evening, Daniel pieced together his sketches and finally noticed a pattern he had missed. The symbols formed a kind of map, not of Earth, but of the stars. At its center was a system astronomers call Zeta Reticuli, a place long whispered about in conspiracy circles as the origin of the so-called visitors. If the map was genuine, then the message in his mind wasn't random. It was a directive, a clue pointing to their true origin. And if Daniel could understand it, maybe he could finally know why they had chosen him. But as he stared at the map, a cold realization struck him. If he had pieced this together, then surely those controlling the secret already knew. The governments, the men in black, the hidden operators, they must have the same knowledge, perhaps more. which meant humanity wasn't just passively hiding the truth, it was actively cooperating with it. And if that was the case, then the real question wasn't whether aliens were here. It was what deal our leaders had struck on our behalf, and whether we were the currency in that bargain. Daniel's search for the truth had consumed his life, and by the time he realized how far he had gone, there was no turning back. The dreams, the symbols, the strange malfunctions around him, all of it pointed to something far larger than his own abduction. He finally understood that what he carried inside him wasn't random. It was intentional. He was not just a witness, he was evidence. Late one night, unable to take the weight any longer, Daniel decided to share everything he had collected. He recorded videos, scanned documents, photographed his symbols, and sent them through secure channels to anyone who might listen: journalists, researchers, even foreign contacts. For days he felt both liberated and terrified, waiting for the knock at his door. It didn't take long. At 3:17 in the morning, the silence of his home shattered with a low vibration, like the hum of an engine that wasn't there. Lights outside his window glowed unnaturally bright, casting long, sharp shadows across the room. He grabbed his phone, but it went dead instantly. The power cut off. Outside, he saw not a car, not a helicopter, but a shape descending silently. A craft, massive, pulsing with light. And at the same time, from the street below, two black sedans arrived, headlights off, doors opening in unison. The visitors and the men in black had come for him together. Daniel froze. Which side was here to take him? Which side had marked him? The thought clawed at him. Maybe they weren't separate sides at all. Maybe the men in black weren't protecting humanity. They were managing the agreement. Maybe they were part of the same structure, human faces covering a non-human agenda. The figures in black approached his door just as the craft above shifted, bathing the street in a blinding white glow. Daniel shielded his eyes, and in that instant he felt the same voice as before, deep inside his skull. Do not resist. You are chosen. The door burst open, shadows moving toward him, but before they reached him he was lifted upward, weightless, pulled into the light. For a moment he saw the men in black frozen below, their faces turned upward, expressionless, as though they had completed their task. When Daniel awoke, he was not in his home. He was in a vast chamber, metallic and endless, with hundreds, no, thousands, of others lying in rows beside him. Some looked confused, some unconscious, others staring blankly as if their minds had been erased. The air vibrated with energy, and above him floated the same symbols that had haunted his dreams. They weren't instructions, they were coordinates, destinations, a map of where humanity was being taken. He understood then, with horrifying clarity, that the conspiracy was not just about secrecy. It was about harvest. Governments had struck a bargain, technology and power in exchange for silence, while portions of their population were studied, altered, and sometimes never returned. The men in black weren't suppressing witnesses to protect society. They were maintaining order while the agreement continued. Daniel was simply one of countless who had been chosen, a piece of a global arrangement hidden behind the facade of normal life. The voice returned one last time, calm but absolute. Your species is not alone. It has never been alone, and soon it will know its place. A blinding flash consumed his vision, and then there was nothing. Daniel was never seen again. The next morning, neighbors reported his house abandoned, his belongings untouched, his phone and computer wiped clean as if they had never contained a trace of evidence. No news outlets covered his disappearance. No police investigation made headlines. His name slipped quietly into silence, another casualty of the cover-up. But somewhere, scattered across hidden forums and encrypted servers, his files remained. The symbols, the testimonies, the documents he had gathered, they survived, waiting for the next person brave enough to look. And that's where the story leaves us, staring at a terrifying question. If Daniel was right, if governments have struck a bargain with something not of this earth, then what role do we play in it? Are we partners? Are we test subjects? Or are we simply the currency in an agreement that has been running for longer than any of us can imagine? You've heard the whispers, You've seen the strange lights in the sky, and now you know the pieces of a story that was never meant to reach you. The world you live in is not what it seems, and the next time you feel that chill on the back of your neck, the next time you see headlights in the dark that never turn on, remember Daniel's story. The truth is out there, and sometimes it comes knocking at your door.